Today's edition of the podcast is brought to you by Coach Me Plus. Coach Me Plus is the leader in athlete management software and a product that I've been lucky enough to be using for a little over a year now. Only rivaled by the impeccable customer service that Kevin and his staff provides, Coach Me Plus's ability to constantly be amoeba-like in their ability to mold and matriculate what you're trying to get across and bring together is absolutely fantastic. Their constant pursuit of better ways and better methods and innovations and progress to their own product is absolutely fantastic. Go over to CoachMePlus.com. Check out what they got, guys. It's something that I guarantee you won't be disappointed with. In this edition of the podcast, I sit down and talk with the University of Pittsburgh's assistant strength and conditioning coach, Tim Beltz. Guys, Tim and I are just going to talk about what it means to Tim to keep things simple, what he focuses on with his student athletes, the whole idea of keeping the goal to goal, his time with Buddy Morris and how that has affected him, and what Tim's doing right now and what's driving the things that he's doing right now with the student athletes of Pittsburgh. It's always great catching up with Tim. He's had a great impact on my career. Hope you guys enjoy the talk as much as I did. Let's get right to it. Hey, Tim, thanks for being on with us today.
Jay, thanks for having me. I appreciate you taking the time to set this up.
Yeah, man. So, we've talked for quite a while now about quite a few things, and I think one thing that always we come back to is just keeping things simple and staying with what works. So let's rap about that a little bit today.
Yeah, I guess part of kind of what's led me into this is like I've just been kind of reevaluating kind of the profession and what direction, where we're going with what we're doing, how we're doing things. And I just keep seeming to, like, there's always something new. There's always something different. It seems to me like what's really big now are kind of like the sports psychologist stages where everybody's got a quote unquote expert that they're going to bring in to help with certain aspects of either the lack of focus or making guys tougher, for lack of a better term. And I think really just, keeping it simple and doing the things that we do well really will help kind of, have kept me pointed, in the right direction. Not overemphasizing like, 8 to 10 years ago when the functional movement screen became the kind of the deal, it was like, Alan and I were kind of taken back. We're like, whoa, wait a minute. It's cool. It's got some benefits, but it's not the end all be all. And I think that, kind of like with everything with training, it's like, okay, well, are we going to force plate our kids? Are we going to catapult them? Are we going to mega wave them? Are we going to put them on a GPS, some other version of the GPS? Are we going to heart rate them? Are we, what kind of auto-regulatory stuff are we doing with them? What kind of readiness questionnaire? Like you can get inundated and kind of lose focus on what's actually important is, teaching the athletes to move better and helping them push weight. And by keeping those two things simple, you can achieve in terms of mentally, you're helping them actually get tougher, not actually making them tough, but getting them to figure out like, wow, I challenged myself there, I was successful. Or I challenged myself there, I failed, but I have confidence in that I can get that again. And that seems to be the direction for me, that where I think the most success can be gained. I mean, I was talking with Alan the other day and just something about some movement stuff, and there's some crazy stuff out there that's really, really good, but I just don't know how applicable it is in our environment.
100%. And kind of piggybacking through all of that, I can say that, without hesitation, that as we've kind of moved back to keeping things simpler and simpler and simpler, and everybody talks about, how you can't stay in your silo. Well, the further I've become more in that kind of quote unquote strength coach silo, the better the guys have been, the more focused they've been, the more effort they've put in.
Yeah.
And I think that especially, and this is just what I'm seeing with this group, the more that they know what to expect from a certain person, the more they're able to give to that certain aspect.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I always kind of revert back to what, from back in the days when Buddy was here and we're going to see Louis Simmons on a regular basis. And, and this is when, the conjugate was really big and West Side Barbell was really big in terms of what we were doing with football and that. And when I say kind of the impact and the impression they had on the program. But Louis was talking about, special exercises and cycling things every 2 weeks. And I remember Buddy saying, well, we can't cycle exercises every 2 weeks, man. Our kids don't pay attention, and, from a central nervous system advancement standpoint, they barely even adapt to the exercise in 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. And so, that's where for me, I'm like, okay, well, wait a minute. I've got to revert back to keeping it simple because early on it was every 2 weeks, bam, new exercise. And now it's kind of like, just to give an example of what we're doing now, the last 3 weeks straight, 4 weeks straight, after we've warmed up, done all of our smoke and mirror stuff, from a movement standpoint, we're hang cleaning and front squatting 3 to 4 days a week. Now, it's not heavy, but from a movement standpoint, they've gotten immensely better at it. Now, for me, looking at it, am I going to gauge the success of our program on how much we can hang clean? No. But if we're moving better and we're doing the exercise better, we're able to generate more force, then now we're able to have success. And I think kind of measuring success that way versus, looking at it as, we need to, now we should be doing, from mid-shin, mid-thigh, from the hip, you know what I mean? And really kind of, I think, making it more complicated than it needs to be. Look, I'm not smart enough. I have to dumb things down for me to understand it.
Well, I think that idea of doing things over and over again is very valid. That's basically what Doc Yessis talks about extensively. He talks about the reason that 1x20 works is because you're not working at such a high load that you can't do it every day.
Right.
And then when you get stuck, you just change the exercise. So yeah, I think that's brilliant because, it takes a ton of reps to learn how to do it.
Yeah. And if that's something like, obviously for me, it's one of my, movements, we should be good at it. If you're going to box squat, you should be good at box squatting. If you're going to board press, you should be good at board pressing. And I mean that just in the sense of, getting kids to hit reps. And look, and I will say this openly, I've got a group of kids that don't even do the hang clean. They don't even clean front squat. They don't do any Olympic stuff. Because they're we've got, whether we have some injuries or they're not ready for it, but that's, it is what it is. Mm-hmm. And that's, I think also it's we being player driven too, I think is another thing that really should be driving kind of what we're seeking out in terms of philosophies and theories. I think the players should be driving our programming, not hey, you do this because this is what we're supposed to do, And I mean that, a player-driven philosophy where, okay, our players don't do this well. Okay, well, this is what we're going to do to combat that. We just spent, I want to say 2 full days of testing with the Neuromuscular Research Lab, the Warrior Lab here at the university. And I got back this booklet. It's that thick of our evaluations. And it's like, whoa, wait a minute. How do I even interpret that? You know what I mean? Like, how, here I am talking about keeping it simple, and I got that stack of papers that, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, how do we deal with all this information? And we all know what it says in that book, from max VO2 to all the other stuff that we did. We all know what it says. We've got poor ankle range of motion. You know what I mean? Some kids have right and left dominant issues. Some kids have right and left balance issues. And it's like, did we need this, all that testing? But for me, I use that because I don't have a screening process. I have what I've developed for myself to be a screening process. and I wanted another set of eyes to look at what we're doing and then be able to say, this is what I've seen, or this is what we see with your group. Okay, are they seeing the same things I'm seeing, and can I create, an environment where we're addressing the issues that we have? Right. And I think at the end of the day, the sole purpose for everybody is to try to do what we can from a performance enhancement standpoint, and then also try to be as proactive as possible in injury management, whether it be your prevention, which we all know doesn't exist, but in your management of, okay, well, we know that if we do some really hard depth drops or some heavy eccentrics, that we're going to cause problems, and we do that over and over again, we're going to create issues. Right. It's making sure that we're not creating issues and overemphasizing muscular imbalances that we may or may not have.
100%. And I think that the whole idea of having it player driven, and I'm actually going to talk about that a little bit on Saturday at Doug's gig, is talking about programming. It's like the whole idea of a needs analysis has kind of gone away, especially when you look at it in three ways. It's like there's the sport, there's the position, and then there's the kid, right? And the third one, that might be the most important one, because you think about it like you need to prescribe exercises to what they can and can't do and what they're not good at and good at. So it's almost like the one that you would look at in the textbooks and say, well, that's third most important, is actually number one.
Yeah. And I mean, it's funny you say that, because I was out at DC training here on Monday, and at Jeff Moyer's place, and it was funny to he's got lots of gadgets, lots of stuff. He's crazy smart, and he has some great ideas. But he says, when our kids come in, we take them outside, we film them, and evaluate. That's his version of the needs analysis, and that's where a few years back, I think Alan did a presentation on the needs analysis, right? I think he might have done one, and I may have done one at Doug's place in Juniata, but nonetheless, it's like I feel like we've gotten away from that, because we've got now all this technology that can help us, and it helps us, but is it really pointing us in the right direction? We've got Catapult, and we're going to be doing some heart rate stuff here. I hope, knock on wood, we get the IRB approved. But it's like, is it changing what we do on a day-to-day basis? Is it really altering what we're doing? I know in the NFL at the professional level, they're shutting players down once they get above a certain load. Right. And I know certain programs have the ability to do that. But I will also say, in games and in practices, I never saw our players get above the threshold that would shut them down. So then you're like, okay, so what are we really doing? Now I'm still in the data collection phase. I'm going to try to wait a full calendar year and do some data collection before I sit back and say, we need to change X, Y, and Z. If there's something that I see that's a glaring response, we're obligated by, putting the student athlete first to protect them in any way, shape, or form. But with the staff that we have, that obviously will never be an issue. But obviously in the Catapult, it gives good stuff, but we don't, in the typical pit way, we don't have the clear sky. You know what I mean? We didn't buy the Bentley, we bought the Pinto.
Right. Well, but it's still going to get you from point A to point B.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and not to complain that boo-hoo, we didn't get the best one, But for me, if you're not getting speed and distance with GPS, I don't know that it's worthwhile.
Yeah. Well, and it's hard inside.
Yeah.
Unless they. Yeah. I don't know. Did they have that the whole sonar system set up?
Yeah, I don't know exactly what they have, but I know they're selling right now. Their newest version is what they're calling a clear sky, and that's where I know, I forget what all the parameters it will give you, but I know it will give speed and distance indoors.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
And so like right now we have they're next door, but we're just doing everything everything in the indoor model, unless I take them outside.
Right. So then let's go back to talking about that needs analysis and the athlete driving it and keeping it simple. So let's talk about that a bit. Let's look at what you're doing, how you're, for example, you mentioned those few kids that aren't doing the clean and the front squat. So let's talk about how you're looking at these kids and some modifications that you're making, but still following kind of that KISS principle that you're using with the kids.
So I've got it set up basically in three different groups right now. My explosive and strength group, my group that obviously they need to get stronger, in terms of just physicality, and they've got to be able to push better weight. Their strength numbers are poor. Their body weight to strength numbers are poor. Mm-hmm. That's my stronger, and they're going to do more Olympic-based training and some stress shortening cycle stuff, some plyos, things of that nature. The other group that I have is my janky leg group, and it's just it's your typical athletes that they have lots of valgus stress when they move, and it's gross how when I say it's the gross movement patterns are really poor, mm-hmm. And they're extremely inefficient mechanically, and so they're kind of in that group. And it's not that look, they don't have any limitations. They're not on an injury report with having a problem. But from a movement standpoint, I've identified them as, okay, we've got issues with movement. We need to kind of go back to ground zero and look at how their hips move, how their what kind of range of motion they have, what kind of tightness they have, and really address those issues before we try to load them with a bar. And not to say that they're not going to do stuff loaded. They're going to do stuff loaded, but within reason. And then I have my weight management group where we're trying to keep them. They have very good body weight to strength ratios, and they're from a weight standpoint. We're trying to keep them lean and fit. I'm not going to say that I'm always happy with our strength numbers with that group, but their effort is never an issue, and we don't have problems with them, being able to hit numbers when I need them to hit numbers.
Well, that's awesome. So let's talk about that middle group a little bit. So if they're not hitting the stuff like that strength power group, so what are you doing different with those kids?
So we're doing a lot of I've been doing a lot of tempo based stuff. Kind of, when I say, I don't want to insult anybody by saying we're using kind of their methodology or philosophy that I've adapted. But I like a lot of Paul Kuhn's principles. I like doing, lighter loads for longer periods of time. And that's something I've actually stolen from Alan, where he was doing some minute up, minute down squats with teaching some of his novice athletes. Now, it may be a body weight exercise, obviously if it's doing, yeah, I would hope so, right? Hey, put 2 1/4 on there, see if you can do a minute up, minute down. But, that's where that philosophy is kind of driven from. Right. And from what I found is that especially with some of my female athletes, that if they have any valgus or, internal external rotation of the femur, or movement, medial lateral movement of the knee while they're squatting, that's eliminated when they're doing that time under tension. Most of the time, it's slow enough that they go through a normal biomechanical movement pattern, and they don't revert back to their old movement pattern or their old movement habits. If you think about if it were possible to slow down the way that they jump, you wouldn't see the gross biomechanical deficiencies manifest themselves, and that's where this group is going with stuff. And it's, I got this from Dan John at the CSCCA National Conference. He was talking about his kids hanging for 30 seconds, then doing a pull-up, and that's how he tests his pull-ups. When you've got to do something for a prolonged period of time, you find out quickly who's strong enough and who's not strong enough. Because they normally will just break down. That's what, especially when you're looking at time under tension. The loads are never going to be significantly heavy unless you're dealing with a specialized athlete. And I say that not at the collegiate level. It's so the time under tension is what I found a lot of success with. I'm not saying we're correcting movement patterns or movement habits. I'm not dumb enough to say that, because I know that being able to say I've corrected something is in my world is a big no-no, because we're not correcting something like a functional movement screen. Somebody scores better. We didn't correct their deficiencies. They just got better at the movement test. But what I have found is that by getting them in slower positions, slower movement patterns, I should say, they're able to yield a better biomechanical efficiency. And the muscle deficiencies and weakness that they have, don't manifest themselves. Mm-hmm. So, when you're squatting and you have, poor patellar tracking because your vastus lateralis and rectus femoris are stronger than your vastus medialis, you're going to have patellar tracking problems. Well, initially on, it hurts my knees, it hurts my knees. We started doing tempo. Never heard a word about the knee pain. Because they're now because when they're doing that squat, not that we're going to use it for a minute, but if you're using it for a minute, the correctable patterns, it's so slow that the corrections that you're voicing are able to be adapted and changed. And it seems a lot of the time when we're trying to look at movement and we're trying to correct somebody who's squatting, it's after they've done the rep, we're like, hey, do this. You know what I mean? It's when you're doing something you're doing something for time, you can correct that as they're doing it versus after they've done it. And that's where I found success in.
So that's really fascinating to me. So like you're literally sitting there, and when they're coming down and you see their knees starting to come, it's like out, hips back, whatever it may be.
Yeah, and let's go back to our days when we were doing a lot of box squatting with Louis kind of the conjugate method with Buddy. I mean, that's especially when you're doing like dynamic effort stuff, right? Mm-hmm. They're moving so fast, and you're trying to get them to really accelerate the bar. It's all of a sudden you're like, okay, wait, slow that down to a 10 count. All right, now the second it takes me to say, sit back on your heels, keep your shin vertical, you can physically do those things during that period of time, right, and yield a good movement pattern. And that's something I've stolen from Alan. I mean, I can't take any credit for it, because he was talking about the success that he was having with some of his athletes at Carnegie Mellon. Is that he's like, look, we may not have them all the time, and this is a great way for me to be able to teach them what we need them to do, and they're smart enough to figure out how to do it.
Well, they're definitely smart enough there.
Oh yeah. They're not down at my level.
Well, what's awesome though is you're looking at something, and this is no disrespect to the student athletes that Alan has, but there's a significant difference between the kids that are playing sports at Carnegie Mellon versus the kids that are athletes at Pittsburgh. And it's working at both ends of the spectrum. So that seems to tell me that this is a pretty effective thing that, I mean, of course, there's going to be outliers, but it seems like this would be something that would be very effective with most student athletes.
Yeah, and for me, from a teaching standpoint, like, in my mind, what do kids lack? Focus and attention to detail. So when you've got to do something for 10 seconds or 20 seconds, 10 seconds down, 10 seconds up, they mindfully have to have, and be present for that period of time. And a lot of times the load may not be that heavy, but you can make the exercise more challenging by, either increasing the level of balance or stability that they have. If they're doing a body weight squat or they're doing something along those lines, that you can create kind of the competitive atmosphere that's going to yield them being more mindful. That's really one of my big things this summer is I was like, look, we need to be mindful of what we're doing, and being present, being in the moment, and that's been a big, I think it's been big help for me, at least, with keeping it simple in terms of the movement patterns and having them get better at the simple things.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we finally we're in week 4 here, and today was our first day of just some single leg. If you want to I call them pistol squats or piston squats.
Right.
The single leg squat down to a bench, and we did it loaded the first day, and only had one kid crash onto the bench. So that shows me like, okay, so what we've been doing is working, and if everybody but one was mindful and paying attention, then we're doing pretty good. You know what I mean? And like those little measurable successes is, am I going to sit back and this is the old Tommy Moffat adage is, hey, the next day's got to be better. Today wasn't good enough. But we're going to continue to keep challenging. But that's, to me, we're making headway towards the direction we want to go. And it's hard for us because we've got our kids for 12 weeks 12 weeks straight. You know what I mean? Everybody would be like, oh my gosh, that's phenomenal. But everybody knows that 10th, 11th, and 12th week, that, with basketball kids, they don't want to be here. There's no games. There's you know what I mean? There's no competitive edge to being here. And so you've got to find winnable moments.
Oh yeah, and on top of that, there's nobody else around, so the only people they're seeing are you and whoever else.
Yeah.
Now you said you did that. You've done that now for 3 weeks, 2 weeks,
4 weeks.
4
We're in
weeks.
our 4th week.
And is that how long you typically see for the need until you have results?
Yeah, you know what? I wish I had a good answer for you. I don't know. I will tell you this: in the postseason, we did 3 weeks, 3 weeks on, a week down, 2 weeks on with the tempo stuff. Phenomenal results. Both from, had every kid PR. Now I didn't actually test lower body stuff, but we deadlifted and deadlift and bench were the primary tests that we used. Had every kid PR.
Wow.
And so from that standpoint, and I wish I had a larger sample size. You know what I mean? Like I wish I had a group of 30 or 40. You know what I mean? To be able to have, when you have smaller groups, you really have to be dialed in. Like when you have a larger sample size, you can have 2 or 3 programs, and if one program's not quite as successful, the deficiencies in that program will probably be made up for another groups. Right. Whereas when you're working with 12 to 14 kids, you can't mess up.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, you can't have any injuries, and they've got to get better. So right. I found that back to your question, I think the 3 week, 2 week phases, I found with that kind of stuff have worked best.
So you did it with a deadlift also, or were you just doing the squat and the carry to the deadlift?
Squat, deadlift, bench, and pull up.
You did the holds and the tempos for all of that.
Yeah, for all of it.
That's awesome, and that's really similar to Jim Snyder talked about that at the seminar last year. It's really similar to some of his ideas with doing holds and things of that nature for the tissue restructuring and remodeling and those sort of things. Mm-hmm. So that's a neat way to do it, and it's really fascinating to me how many people seem to take away, do things simpler, slow down, focus on technique, and not bury kids. And all of a sudden, they're just talking consistently about, well, we're getting better at all this stuff.
Yeah.
And we're healthy.
It's funny you say that because I kind of revert back to when, remember when Jay Schrader had like Adam Archuleta, and he was like, they're doing like, isometric, quasi-isometrics, and they were doing holds for like 45 seconds with like crazy loads, and and everybody's like, kind of, what's going on? And I remember everybody kind of reverting back to that. And then I saw Dan John present at the CSCCA, and his deal was easy strength. And he was like, just keep it simple. Mm-hmm. Pick 5 exercises, do them 5 days a week. You know what I mean? And that works, I think, really more in the competitive post-collegiate athlete world. In our world, it would be very, I think, a little bit harder to implement his system. Not that you couldn't have success with it, because I'm sure you can have success with a lot of things. But just hearing him say, keeping it simple, never going to failure, never missing reps, always feeling like you got one in the tank, and that's one of Buddy's deals. Like, we'd be doing stuff, and when we would be max effort, doing West Side stuff, and it would be max effort stuff. And the first 2 weeks that we'd be doing stuff, he'd be like, always leave one in the tank. You know what I mean? And that kind of that mindset of always leaving one bullet loaded. That way you always have it to use. And that kind of goes back to a lot of the good practitioners, the Charlie Francis of the world, and all the smart people, way smarter than me. That they're always leaving themselves battery half full versus half empty. Right. Kind of keeping everybody primed and charged. I think that's been a really good tool, for lack of a better word.
No, and I couldn't agree more. And I think that going to failure is, a tool that needs to be kind of kept in your back pocket for a special occasion,
Yeah, and not to say that, like, look, there's some kids that I have that they need to go to failure on a regular basis. And not that they need to fail, but they need to learn how to work through that failure.
Mm-hmm.
And that's and there's different stages. Like, obviously with a lot of your novice lifters, you don't necessarily want to do it's always high level contraindication when you're dealing with novice lifters and taking them to failure.
Right. But
also the kid that takes the bar off the rack and takes it to the chest, I can't do it. Well, obviously that's not to failure.
Right.
Right. If they're telling you, hey, I this is too heavy, I can't do this. Or you just watch the bar, if his buddy says, if it's hell bent broke for election and it comes down and breaks their chest, it's too heavy.
Right.
Right. I was like, well, all right, that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
But, like, we know whether or not, like, okay, that was failure. This is, and so, and that's where I always, I completely agree with you. The doing stuff to failure, doing stuff just because it's hard versus doing it for the purpose. I think there's a lot that goes into that. And I think now in my world of college basketball, I think that everybody's just gone to the CrossFit / circuit mentality of just make it hard so they sweat a lot versus, and throw in corrective exercises, and then you walk out the door and that was a good day.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I'm like, okay, well, we need to, in my mind, we need to be able to, be able to tolerate and handle loads, and we need to be able to repetitively jump at an elite level for each individual person. That's their level of elite.
Right.
Whether you're 12, whether you're down there with me at the 12-inch vertical range, or you're up with the DeMaos of the world in the 30 and the 40 range.
Yeah, once upon a time.
Those elite level soccer days.
Yeah. I think they were called the 90s. Oh. But no, Tim. Tim, man, some freaking fascinating points. Just keeping it simple, making sure you're good at what you're going to do, and slowing things down to learn are three key things that, if you can't take that from this talk and implement that when you turn this off, and I don't know what to do. Those are some big time points that I think that are really overlooked, like the needs analysis that people need to keep in mind, man. I really appreciate your candor and you being so open with what you're doing and sharing with everybody today.
Yeah, well, hey, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it, and I enjoy the podcast. So I'm honored and pleasure. It's my pleasure to be here.
Well, thanks again, buddy, and we'll talk real soon. All right, bud.
All right, sounds good.
All right, man.
All right, bye.
Huge thanks to University of Pittsburgh's assistant strength coach Tim Beltz for sitting down and talking with us today. Guys, every time I talk with Tim, I always take a ton from it. I hope you guys enjoyed the talk. If you did, please share it through the social media outlet of your choice. Tweet it, Instagram, Facebook, whatever it may be. Help us share the information, guys. We're just trying to get good stuff out to the great coaches out there. So if you could share it for us, we'd be greatly appreciative. Again, thank you guys for being a part of everything we do here at Central Virginia Sport Performance. We will be back next week with another awesome guest. We will see you then.